Hilberth. What a strangely hypnotic title. It really spoke volumes about the game. A world where two warring cities fight full-scale battles every week. I've never quite felt such a burning desire to support a cause when I was younger, no matter how confusing and vague it was. But I was there, ready to lend a hand in slaying all manner of beast and foe. In this second video about MMOs of the past, I'm going to explore the player versus player centered world of Helbreath. It was one of those games that was only truly fun when you were at the heart of a fight with others. Even at early levels, you'd find yourself constantly in danger. It may have been a bit clunky design-wise and may not have been perfectly balanced, but it was a roller coaster of emotions. My name's Basil, and let's take a ride on that roller coaster one more time. Helbreath originated in South Korea in 1999, but it wasn't released internationally until years later. The game received moderate success and still has a sizable fan base today, considering it's 2 decades old. This is all possible due to the ability to run your own servers with modified rule sets. In my case, my recent experience was on the popular Olympia server. Whether it's higher level caps, new items, monsters, or events, you know that servers will be trying to attract players with a sense of uniqueness. The game exists in a sort of 3-dimensional isometric world. It doesn't feel amazing to move around today, and unfortunately, it has certainly aged. For example, when running along walls or buildings, you actually zigzag instead of running straight. It's kind of jarring and annoying sometimes. But we have to consider for the time at 1999, it was cutting edge as far as the visual representation goes. You'll find that all of this combined with any latency issues will cause unit collision problems, resulting in sudden relocations of your character. Annoying, but you learn to deal with a wide array of problems. You have a standard standstill attack to shred through your enemies, that is, if you can actually hit them, which is dependent upon your dexterity and specific weapon skill level. After successfully hitting an enemy a certain amount of times, your weapon skill will increase 1% at a time, up to 100%, where you're granted a critical long-range strike. It was super cool back in the day. Your character screamed when he or she would swing their weapon, and you'd see a larger bold text displaying the crit. If you weren't a fan of the melee life, you could specialize in magic, which the skill could also be increased by successful spellcasts. The road to 100% magic was a long one. Learning all the spells required a high intellect level, and there are a lot of them. Tons of self-buffs, offensive abilities, and status ailments to cast, which all had varying degrees of difficulty when it came to casting that magic. The best part about Helbreath, and honestly a lot of PC RPGs back in the day, was customization. You could build your character how you wanted to. Full-on warrior, battle mage, fencers, dex mages, pure mages, the list goes on. Interestingly enough, what I speak of could be different from server to server and is just based on what I remember from back in the day and combined with my recent experience with Olympia. I'm sure I'm missing some details. There were a lot of nuances I didn't quite get to experience. The game's plot is largely centered around the cities of Aresden and Elvine, 2 warring factions that are motivated by their strong and passionate beliefs in their gods, Aresden and Elvine. The towns were connected by the Middlelands and underground paths, both of which featured some high-level monsters and some amazing loot drops. The stakes, of course, were being killed and looted yourself. Yes, this again was a game where you dropped gear upon dying unless if you were carrying what is called a gemstone, which most high-level players carried considering their valuable gear. Gemstones would be dropped instead, of course only a certain amount of times before it decayed, and any monster in the game dropped them. I remember getting one myself off of early level monsters such as slimes. Olympia has increased the drop rate of these significantly and featured various versions of the gemstones. This game also dropped loot to the ground and other people could potentially steal from you. My buddy Dark Shadow, whom if you recall from my last video, would revel in his thievery. In this game, he took on the persona of Yogs, a crazed madman warrior that would attack anyone he possibly could. Anyways, like most RPGs and MMOs of the time and today, drops were the name of the game and they were very exciting to see. Sometimes you could see something sticking out underneath whatever corpse that populated the area. There were several drop types, and I seem to recall ancient and righteous weapons being the best, but don't quote me on that. The other drop types include sharp, critical, poison, strong, light, and agile. There were other modifiers that existed, but these were the primary types. Armor also featured a wide variety of attributes. Overall, the itemization system gets a thumbs up for me. It was exciting and still is thrilling to find these items in Olympia. This isn't even mentioning the deep enchanting system that exists within Olympia today, which adds a lot of replay value and excitement to the drops you can find. It can also feel grindy, but I digress. This was one of my first games that I experienced that had events, primarily Crusades, which asked players to invade other towns. I personally never got to participate in one because I was always at school during these times that they occurred. From what I'm gathering, it had to do with destroying a town's defense shield by building mana collectors in the Middlelands. These areas would be hotly contested, and you'd find yourself doing everything in your power to control these areas. Even lower level players could participate and potentially sway the battle. The rewards varied from server to server, but you can bet players wanted to be on the winning side. Not to mention, getting kills rewarded you with EKs, enemy kills, which you could use to purchase some powerful upgrades. The game had a lot to offer for its time and surely was a part of the harsh MMORPG world. Developers of the early millennium wanted to create intense and very real atmospheres. Naturally, death was the best motivator and way to achieve these goals. Sending your player base to a far-away, dangerous place, dropping valuable gear that you obtained on your own time, the loss of the ability to help your team win exclusive PvP events, even attacking players in areas that would be safe zones today. Many of these things simply no longer exist because they're harsh and off-putting to casual gamers. And I don't really mean that in a disparaging way. Some people just can't afford to waste their time on negative experiences. People who don't have time simply cannot afford to play a game sparingly and still make significant progress, because there will always be other ruthless players looking to chew you up. It becomes a matter of prey versus predator. In this zero-sum kind of game, the predators will eventually kill their own game by simply playing it the way it was meant to be played. Fortunately, private servers have made attempts to fix this problem, although I'm sure there are still dilemmas. The Olympia server has found a way to correct new player ganks simply by increasing the aforementioned Zemstone drop rates. I've been killed several times at this point, only to lose a handful of Zemstones, which I really still don't like losing. In fact, it seems there is a ton of incentive to invade and get kills on the other team and city. Problem seems solved. Olympia is one of the best Hilberth experiences I've ever had, and I've played on quite a few servers over the years. It hits home on a lot of what I remember from the original game. Basically everything I mentioned so far is in the game in some capacity, yet there are so many improvements, and one of the best and integral improvements is enchanting. As I mentioned before, there are many variations of the items that drop, and within those variations are itemizations that are desirable, even at lower levels. For example, hit and defense ratio are two sought after stats, so upon finding these items, you can disenchant their qualities into shards or fragments. This system automatically stashes them for you, and you can accumulate quite a bunch of them, even going as far to combine and upgrade their quality and level. It can be a bit discouraging to get useless junk stats like endurance or gold, however, it is still nice knowing that you're working towards something as you level your character. The extra variance and improvement doesn't stop there, as you were granted 2 major specialization points in the leveling process, many of which include choosing a specific type of weapon, magic, or passive stat increase. These are major. I went with fencing and poison, which ends up clearing dozens and dozens of monsters quickly by hitting multiple enemies at the same time, while slowly disintegrating their health with poison. It's a great build to grind loot and EXP mindlessly. There are a lot of combinations to comb through, and I'm seriously impressed by the amount of thought put into the system. It allows for a lot of creativity, keeps PvP and PvE in mind, and makes me want to try all of the builds. One thing that I'm skeptical of are rebirths. It definitely adds some tedium to the game on top of what old MMOs are, which is tedious. I'm working on maxing my companion fairy before I rebirth, but it's still taking quite a long time to do this, let alone restarting a slow process of leveling for just 3 stat points. I get that over time these add up quite a bit, but it's pretty clear that they take a massive amount of my time. I suppose there is an exhilaration of restarting from level 1, 20% minus EXP per rebirth. Good lord, is that gonna add up fast. If you rebirth enough, you could end up having a pretty crazy stat build. But despite my reservations, I get why it would take so long to achieve these incremental power spikes. I see some people have achieved 10, 15, even 17 of these rebirths. That combined with your angel, which basically gives another 5 levels worth of stats, and you're looking at an impressively strong character, just one with an insane amount of playtime. The game's setting is certainly dark, and as stated previously, there are a good bit of hunting grounds to explore. However, it does get really tiresome of looking at this same bland green ground as creatures unthematically randomly populate areas. I'm looking at you, Rudolph. Not to mention the frogs, like, come on. I know that there are some underground areas and places that potentially represent hellish locations, but there is no variation in what you're looking at. It seems that this is just a product of the time. Since my middle school days, it just doesn't seem like there were many creatures and areas added to the game. Gosh, just saying it like that is depressing. This game is old. Anyways, as I stated previously, there are a lot of nuances I don't quite understand with the game. Dueling and PvP interactions tend to be very one-sided, as you typically get jumped by mages, paralyzing you and spike fielding you, sentencing you to death. And on the flip side, as a fencing, poisoning specialist, melee duels were grueling. I didn't have enough damage to outright kill someone, and I was too difficult to kill for many people, considering my high defensive stats. I actually ended up spending over 45 minutes fighting over a gold chest at one point during my excursion through this game. The guy refused to stop trying to kill me, and I refused to give him the golden chest, and luckily for me, an ally of mine showed up and we scared him off. I feel so fortunate to live in this day and age where I can return to the things that used to give me great happiness, like Hilberth and Dranzik. These two MMORPGs alongside RuneScape gave me more thrills and excitement than most games. For those of you who were there during the times of the explosion of the MMORPG market, look back with nothing but glee. You were among the first people in the history of the world to interact in such a unique way. You can definitely put a bit of pride in that. Unfortunately, it seems that these kinds of games aren't coming back. But I'm gonna keep an eye out, and maybe I can get back into a Hilberth-styled game. Hilberth, thank you for all of the great memories and attention. If any of you are interested in playing the version of Hilberth I mentioned, Olympia, a link will be down in the description below. I wanted to give a quick shout out to Neartox, Wolf, and of course Clareth, the designer behind the server. Neartox was my guild leader at one point and helped me farm up some EXP, and I got to take down some huge monsters with him and my other guildies. And Wolf was a kind Elvine who went out of his way to help me, even though I was Aresden. He geared me up and prepped me for the harsh worlds of Hilberth Olympia. Anyways guys, I've done my job and now it's yours. I have 2 more ancient MMORPGs currently lined up to review and talk about, but I'd like to hear from all of you. If you've played Hilberth yourself, hit me up in the comments and tell us all about the memories you had with the game. What class did you play? Favorite moments? Hunting spots? All of that stuff. And if you have any ideas for other MMORPGs to talk about, I'd really appreciate it. I've been really hungry for some good retrospectives. Hey, I'm Basil, checking out. The Super Retro Bros have a lot more content coming your way, so until next time, thanks for watching.